Well, hi, my name is Marc Brûlé, and I've got the honor and privilege to do a devotional on video today, and I have written a series of devotionals to cover this next week. If you've been journeying with us in the devotionals, you'll know that in the past number of weeks we've been talking about one particular scripture that has to do with loving God. When Jesus was asked what the first and most important commandment was, he responded by quoting an Old Testament scripture that says to love God. And he said it like this in Mark 12, verse 30. He said, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength." And so I want to talk about that last little piece, loving God with all your strength. And my initial thought is, when I look at that, is I ask myself, what does that even mean? Like, what does it mean to love God with your strength? Strength is a big deal for guys. I remember when I was a kid, arguing with my next door neighbor. My dad is stronger than your dad. My dad could beat up your dad. And we had an animated argument with each other about whose dad was stronger. And of course, every kid thinks their dad is the strongest in the world. And I actually went to my dad and asked him, Dad, would you please go beat up the next door neighbor, because I want to prove to him that you are stronger than he is, which of course didn't happen. We were neighbors and they were friends, and they were not going to accommodate that. So we never did get to watch the fight. And I know in reality, my dad would have lost. But anyway, that's a non-issue. But we, even as kids, we have this concept, this understanding of an innate value of strength. It's an ability to accomplish something. It's a capacity. It's something that's not static. It's something that moves, that gives motion. And we spend our lives using it. We spend our lives growing it. We spend our lives looking for it. And it shows itself in different ways. When I think about this passage, particularly loving God with your strength, it reminds me of when I went to Israel a number of years ago. And when we were in Jerusalem at the Wailing Wall, there were numerous Orthodox Jews who were praying at the Wailing Wall, and they would hold their prayer book and they would be bowing back and forth with their body like that. And I always wondered why they did that. I'd seen it on TV, and there I was standing. And so I asked our tour guide, I said, why is it that when they pray, they're bowing back and forth like that? And he said, that comes from they're doing that based on the verse that says, love the Lord your God with all your heart and your soul and your strength. He said what they're doing is by physically exerting themselves during their time of prayer, it's their way of loving God with their strength. They're not just praying internally, they're not just speaking the words out, but they're engaging themselves physically, and that's their expression of loving God with their strength in their time of prayer. I thought that was really quite interesting, but it helped me realize something, is that strength is an outward thing. You see, this passage of scripture talks about loving God with your heart, with your soul, with your mind, and those are all internal processes. I know that, our attitudes, our words, a lot of things come out of those things, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks, for example. But the strength is the only piece of this verse that is specific to an outward expression. You see, our faith was not meant to be lived only inwardly. Our love for God was not meant to be hidden. Our love for God was meant to be displayed, expressed, lived out loud. So he doesn't just tell us to love him in our hearts, but he tells us to love him with our strength. He tells us to demonstrate our love for God. And as we journey through this week, we're going to talk about loving God with our strength. Where does strength come from? How do we love God with our strength? How do we make sure that we don't make it all about us and our abilities and our strength, but how is it that we tap into God's strength and bring honor to him? And so I'm really looking forward to this week, and I hope that you really engage well and that we learn to live a life that loves God, not just inwardly, but also outwardly.